everyone, and thank you to everyone who is joining us live, and also to those who will be listening to us afterwards. I'm Nikolina Biskic. I have been working in regulatory affairs since, mostly in regulatory affairs since my graduation, and I am a pharmacist by training. I will be a moderator of this event. We are pleased to be delivering this event today. Today we will be discussing the topic of regulatory reliance, more specifically the impact of regulatory reliance on expanding global access to essential medicines. I'm very pleased to be having our speaker, Asma Khalil, whom we will be able to ask any questions at the end of this webinar. You can use the Q&A box to write all the questions, and then I will be the one who will be reading them to our speaker after the presentation. Please also be informed that this presentation will be recorded, and it will also be available at www.events.fib.org afterwards, and it will also be live streamed on YouTube. So Asma, please feel free to start. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Nikolina. Good day, everyone. It is my pleasure meeting you. Today, we will talk about the importance of regulatory reliance and its impact on the availability of the medicines globally. At first, we will have an introduction about the implementation of regulatory reliance. The strong regulatory systems for medicines are a critical element of well-functioning systems for health authorities and important contributors to improving access and achieving universal health coverage. So by establishing an efficient regulatory system, that means we need to have a skilled human resources and financial investment. Back in 2020, the WHO World Health Organization issued the first version of good reliance practices and regulatory decision-making under the title High-Level Principles and Recommendations, with the objective to encourage the practice of regulatory reliance. In these guidelines, the WHO encouraged the health authorities to apply the reliance approach. The authority relies on the decision taken by a foreign national regulatory authority, NRA, of a trusted jurisdiction. In such a way, the authority expects to facilitate the regulatory procedures and reduce the regulatory burden faced by medicine manufacturers interested in marketing their products in the country. The WHO supports the implementation of reliance on other regulators' work as a general principle to make the best use of available resources and expertise. So that means the need of international collaboration between all health authorities to ensure the safety, quality, and efficacy of locally registered medicinal products. Reliance enables placing a greater focus at the national level on value-added regulatory activities that cannot be undertaken by other authorities. Example, pharmacovigilance of the in-country activity, oversight of local manufacturing and distribution. In this slide, we will know together what is the meaning of the global collaboration. Each national regulatory authority have to consider enhanced, innovative, and more effective forms of collaboration as to make the best use of the available resources and expertise and to avoid duplication, as well to concentrate the regulatory efforts and resources where most needed. In this slide, we will know together what is the definition of regulatory reliance. According to WHO, regulatory reliance is the act whereby the national regulatory authority consider and give significant weight to evaluation performed by another national regulatory authority or trusted institution in reaching its own decision. The relying authority remains independent, responsible, and accountable regarding the decision taken, even when it relies on the decisions and information of others. So that means each health authority which will implement the regulatory reliance will have the availability to take its own and independent decision, whatever would the reference decision which she tried to depend on during the evaluation of the dossiers. Another definition which will be related to the regulatory reliance is the recognition. And according to WHO, recognition is the routine acceptance of the regulatory decision of another regulator or other trusted institution. So recognition indicates that evidence of conformity with the regulatory requirements of country A is sufficient to meet the regulatory requirements of country B. In this slide, we will have an illustration and example about the reliance. So reliance is an effective way of regulating medicine through using local resources more efficiently. And reliance is not a new concept. All of us know the certificate of pharmaceutical product. It is a template initiated by WHO as a reliance tool in partial assessment for marketing authorization of products. It is a form to provide assurance to countries participating in the same scheme about the quality of pharmaceutical products. Good regulatory practices. Health authorities are encouraged to formulate and implement strategies to strengthen the regulatory systems and to be consistent with good regulatory practices. In order to know what is the good regulatory reliance practices, if we will try to illustrate it as a triangle. In the base of the triangle, as you see, the normal standard regulatory process shown in the light blue color. The National Regulatory Authority evaluate the dossiers, either it is related to the registration dossiers of the product or registration dossiers of the manufacturing site. And they evaluate these dossiers and inspect the manufacturing sites and take their final decision independently. So this is a normal standard regulatory process. In the orange color, we will see what is the concept of reliance, work sharing, or joint review. Reliance on regulatory decisions performed by other competent and trusted agencies. And the definition of work sharing and the concept of work sharing, it is a collaboration with other regulators to reduce the workload with independent final decision making. An example which is implemented in many regions is the abridged and verification pathway. And in the following slides, we will know what is the abridged pathway and what is the verification pathway and the differences between them and how to implement these pathways as a work sharing model. And in the top of the triangle, the recognition pathway. The recognition is a unilateral or mutual recognition. It is based on equivalent, providing maximal benefits, but partial loss of sovereignty with regard to decision making. An example of the unilateral or mutual recognition is decentralized procedures, which is applied in Europe for the mutual recognition procedures and decentralized procedures registration of the products. So that means the recognition and the reliance procedures. It is a regulatory cooperation based on harmonization to improve the quality of decision-making process. In this slide, we will know how the health authorities will improve the efficiency of their systems and health systems based on reliance. As we said in the previous slide, that the normal procedures and the standard procedures, the health authority take their final independent decision based on their final and own revision and review for the submitted registration dossier and based on the performed inspections by the National Regulatory Authority. And the second procedure which can be applied is the work sharing procedure. In the work sharing procedure, the health authority depend on the decision of the other competent and trusted authority to reduce the workload performed by their regulators with independent final decision making. And the third pathway is the abridged pathway using Reliance. And the fourth is the regional reliance mechanism. In the regional reliance mechanism, it is implemented in the centralized evaluation conducted for a group of countries, like the centralized procedures in Europe, and like the centralized procedures in Gulf Health Council in Gulf region. At the final level of reliance is the unilateral or mutual recognition. In these procedures, the health authorities take the final decision based on treaties or equivalent providing maximal benefits. So in this diagram illustrates how the national regulatory authority can gain efficiencies in their regulatory operations and how to avoid the duplication by increasing the use of reliance approaches. So that's mean in the mutual recognition or in unilateral procedure, there is a joint and work sharing between the health authorities, and each health authority will be responsible to review some specific points or some specific documentation, or responsible to do a specific regulatory task, and the other authorities will do the other tasks to compile the final report of the assessment by sharing the regulatory activities to be performed by each authority. So what is the scope of good regulatory reliance practices? It covers reliance activities related to the regulation of medicinal products. Medicinal products that mean cover pharmaceutical products, vaccines, blood and blood products, and medical devices as well, including in vitro diagnostics. So the regulatory functions which can be covered by the regulatory reliance includes registration and marketing authorization of products, pharmacovigilance, market surveillance and control, licensing establishments, and the registration of the manufacturing sites, regulatory inspection, laboratory testing, clinical trials, and national regulatory authority local release. So that means the regulatory reliance concept can be applied for the registration and granting the marketing authorization of products, can be applied for the pharmacovigilance activities to be performed by each country or by each health authority, and the post-marketing surveillance and the granting the license for the manufacturing site and for the companies as well, and for the inspection which shall be performed for each manufacturing site or for each company, as well for the quality control testing performed for each product, and the clinical trials performed for each product as well. An additional work sharing procedures is the lot release of each product produced by the company, whether it will be a medical device or vaccines or blood products or a pharmaceutical product. So as we said in the previous slide, that regulatory reliance can be implemented for clinical trial development and clinical trial application and registration of drug products and registration of manufacturing sites, pharmacovigilance activity, post-authorization and batch release products, GMP inspections, and post-market control. So in each activity of these of all of these steps which can be performed by the health authorities, it can be performed independently by one authority, a national health authority, or it can be shared by several authorities through the regulatory reliance concept, either by abridged or verification or the centralized procedures or the other examples of procedures which you can see the examples in the following slides. So in these slides, we will have examples of regulatory reliance and how the health authorities can make use of the regulatory reliance regulatory reliance guidelines suggested by WHO. At the first example, the MENA verification and abridged review. The MENA verification and approved review, it is applied for the same products. So that means the manufacturing company will submit the product X to authority A. And authority A will evaluate the dossier and will finally prepare the final assessment report. The manufacturing site will try to submit the dossier to authority B for the same product which was applied to authority A. So that means the same qualitative and quantitative composition, the same strength, the same pharmaceutical form, the same indication, the same manufacturing process, the same active pharmaceutical ingredient suppliers. So the same information included in the first submission to country A will be applied again to country B for the same product. So what is the difference between verification and approved registration? For verification, that means I will apply my product for registration in FDA and for registration in EMA. And once I will grant the marketing authorization license from both authorities, I will be able to go through the verification pathway registration in MENA. So after granting the marketing authorization from FDA and EMA, I will be able to go through the verification process in MENA depending on the granted marketing authorization from both authorities, FDA and EMA. For the approved registration, I can go through this process in MENA once my product is approved from one of the two authorities, FDA or EMA. At first, I will apply the dossier for registration in FDA or apply the dossier for registration in EMA. And once I grant the license from one of them, either FDA or EMA, I will be able to apply the registration in MENA through the approved registration. So in MENA region, several national regulatory authorities implemented the approved and verification review. And by this pathway, they facilitate the revision and the license, marketing authorization license will be granted in a short time. So it can be used for the life-saving drugs to be registered in MENA region in a short time. And it can be a good use to be implemented to grant the license for products when there is no other therapeutic alternative existed in the MENA region. There are some criteria for the verification and the approved review. We will see in this slide these common criteria. That the registration by verification or approved applied only for new products. So that means it is applied for new chemical entity and biological products. In order to submit the dossier for registration in MENA Health Authority, we have to do this within the first 2 years from the date of approval by the reference drug regulatory agencies, FDA or EMA. So once I will grant the license, I will have a timeline which is 2 years after granting the license from FDA and or EMA. After that, I can go through the verification and approved Hello, Nikolina. Excuse me for the internet disconnection. Please confirm, are you hearing me now?
Yes, please continue.
Okay. So for the product and its intended use, with their indication, dosage information, and patient group, we shall confirm that it hasn't been rejected or withdrawn or suspended by any regulatory agency for safety or efficacy reason, in order to confirm that it will be accepted by MENA authorities for the registration under verification or approved pathway. Excuse me, Nikolina, can you please give me an access to the presentation, as I think I lost the access?
Absolutely, now you should have.
Yes, now I have the access. Okay, thank you. In this slide, we will have an idea about the timelines of the verification and approved pathway. For the verification, it is applied in Saudi FDA and Egyptian Drug Authority and the United Arab Emirates Ministry of Health Authority. The timeline is 30 working days. From the date of submission of the application, I have 30 working days to grant the license via verification procedures. While for Jordan FDA, they specify the timeline within 60 working days, we grant the license from Jordan FDA for the registration via verification procedures. For approved pathway, Saudi FDA and Egyptian Drug Authority specify the timeline within 60 working days to grant the license. And for Jordan FDA, they specify the timeline to be 90 working days to grant the license when go through the approved procedures in Jordan FDA. So that means the Reliance procedure is an approach, but at the same time, one size doesn't fit all. What is the meaning of one size doesn't fit all? Reliance is a tool offering flexibility to national regulatory authority. So that means by this approach, the National Health Authority need to consider its own capacities and to establish clear targets and efficient process, and to ensure standards and criteria are transparent and well established when adopting Reliance. We will have an example how one size doesn't fit all. When I apply my dossier for registration in Europe, I have to include the stability study related to the stability zone of Europe. So that means the long-term conditions of the stability and the accelerated conditions of the stability shall be following the European guidelines, and to include all the stability data depending on the stability zone. So if I will apply my dossier for registration in EMA, and after granting the license, I will go through the process of registration in MENA through the approved procedures. In this case, I have to keep in my consideration that I will include the stability data of my product, including the stability zone information for GCC region. So that means the long-term stability results shall be complying to the stability zone of MENA region. So the role of the manufacturer is essential here in order to confirm the sameness of a product and to provide the same documentation to different health authorities and to take in consideration the additional country-specific information to be included, like the stability data, as well to take in consideration that the product information which will be included, like the product information, summary of product characteristics, the patient information leaflet will mention the storage condition related to the stability data obtained during the manufacturing process development, and it will be complying to the stability zone of the country where they will apply the dossier. Another pathway for the Reliance procedure is the GHC registration. It is the central registration in Gulf. The Gulf Health Council membership is limited to GCC member states, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and United Arab Emirates. So GHC is working to unite the efforts of the member states to achieve unified Gulf Health. So that means when I go through the central registration, I will submit my dossier for registration at GHC. And once I will grant the license, I will be able to market the product in several Gulf countries, 6 Gulf countries at the same time. So this is another example of the regulatory alliance which has been implemented by Gulf health authorities. Another example is the European procedures, the mutual recognition, decentralized procedures, and centralized procedures. The European regulatory reliance, as we said, we have 3 pathways. The centralized procedure, we will grant a marketing authorization license with 1 invented name, 1 trade name, and the product information related to the patient information leaflet, SMPC, and label will be common in all European member states. While for the second pathway, which is the decentralized procedure, I will submit my application for more than 1 country. I will choose more than 1 European country. And in this case, the product hasn't previously granted any marketing authorization at the time of application from any member state in Europe. The third pathway and the third example is the mutual recognition procedure. In this procedure, the application will be intended for more than 1 country, and at least it will be 2 European member states. And for mutual recognition procedure, the product already has granted a marketing authorization license at the time of application from 1 member state or more than 1 European member state. Another example for the regulatory alliance is the mutual recognition agreement of an inspection between the European Union and the United States. The agreement relating to the mutual recognition of inspections confirmed that the FDA had the capacity, and procedures in place to perform GMP inspection at a level equivalent to the European Union. So that means the European member states will not duplicate the inspection conducted by the FDA, and at the same time, the FDA will not duplicate the inspection conducted by the European recognized authority. The current operation scope of the agreements include only human medicine products, with exclusion of vaccines and plasma-derived products for the mutual agreements between Europe and FDA. Nikolina, excuse me, I'm trying to move to the second slide, but I have no access to go through the next slide. Yes, okay, thank you. Another example the PEX is the Pharmaceutical Inspection Cooperation Scheme. It is a non-binding informal cooperative arrangement between regulatory authorities in the field of GMP for human and veterinary use. The PEX comprises 56 participating authorities from Europe, Africa, America, Asia, and Australia. PECS aims to lead the international development implementation and to maintain a harmonized GMP standards and quality systems of inspectors in the field of medicinal products. As we heard previously, that another example for Reliance is for clinical trials. So Reliance can be implemented for work sharing in the evaluation of clinical trials, and it is implemented in some regions in Europe and in African vaccine regulatory form. They evaluate together the clinical trials, and each national regulatory authority can make use of the evaluation performed by the participating country. Finally, we will discuss the advantages of regulatory alliance. The regulatory efficiency, that means the product will be reviewed in a short time, and the marketing authorization license will be granted in a short time. So that means faster review and time to approval. And a second advantage is to facilitate access to safe, effective, and quality assured medicinal products, and as well to make effective use of resources. So that means Reliance is not an opportunity to reduce resources of participating national regulatory authority, but to ensure that the agency will avoid duplication and focus resources on key activities that bring value to the populations they serve. So by the regulatory reliance, it can help in regulatory preparedness, response, and particularly during public health emergencies like COVID-19 pandemic. If we can see during the COVID-19 pandemic, how the European agencies and the GHC worked together to implement the regulatory alliance in order to grant licenses either for medical devices or for products to be used for the treatment and for the safety of the populations during these emergencies. So that means a special consideration to be given through the implementation of Reliance to address the priority diseases with unmet medical needs, medical products to be used in public health emergencies or during shortages, as well for orphan medical products. So by this, we go through the most important and advantages of regulatory reliance. And this is the final slide in the presentation. And I would like to know if there is any raised inquiry from participants.
Thank you very much, Asma, for the presentation. So yes, during your presentation, we collected some questions, so I will be reading them out. Okay, the first one, I will just read it out. So the question is, what's your view when initial MA is approved through Reliance, but later applicants apply variation which are not approved by reference authority? Does the application still qualify to be Reliance, or should Reliance be applicable throughout the product lifecycle?
The concept of Reliance depends on the total life cycle of the product. So once the marketing authorization license is granted from specific territory A, I have the ability to submit my dossier for registration in another country, depending on the assessment report granted from country A. So in case the variation was submitted and there is no approval granted from the authority, in this case, the evaluation in authority B will depend on the final assessment report granted without including the variation. So once I will, the applicant will grant the approval approval for the variation, they can submit later on after passing the evaluation for the Reliance and taking the first approval. Then they can submit the variation package depending on the assessment report of authority A, in order to make good use of time and not to wait until taking the approval from authority A for the variation package, and then to submit the total updated dossier. So in this case, they will go through the Reliance process depending on the dossier and the granted assessment report by authority A without including the variation information.
Thank you very much. I'll read the next question. Can Reliance be implemented using only public assessment reports, or the full assessment reports have to be shared with the relying agency?
At first, they will use the public assessment report, and if the authority will need any additional information, they can contact directly the relying authority, or they can contact the applicant to provide the total assessment and the detailed assessment report. So the public is satisfactory for the first submission.
Great, thank you very much. The next question reads, do we have standard regulations for product registration that is common to all regulatory authorities?
A standard regulation to be common for all health authorities?
Yes.
Actually, most of the authorities nowadays are implementing ICH guidelines, which is the CTD guidelines for the registration of the products. But there are still some minor countries are not implementing CTD. So in this case, for each submission, I have to go through the website and to check the current guidelines of the authority, whether they are implementing CTD or NIS or CTD according to the ICH guidelines, or the authority implementing its own national regulatory authority. So upon planning the registration plan for example, for quarter 4 2023, I have to contact my agents or to contact the health authority and to ask about the current guidelines, to check what is the guidelines, what is the upcoming guidelines for registration, or the country implementing a local guidelines for the registration.
Thank you very much. We have another question. What are the requirements in terms of documentation to successfully apply Reliance for MA in the MENA region?
As we said in our presentation, we have two pathways for registration in MENA, depending on Reliance. It is the verification and the abridged procedures. For the verification procedures, I have to have under my hand two approvals, one from US FDA and the second from EMA. I can submit my dossier depending on these two approvals from MENA and FDA, starting from the time of approval, and I have a timeline which is 2 years after granting the approvals from EMA and FDA. This is for the verification procedures. While for abridged procedures, I have to confirm that my product granted a marketing authorization license from one of them, one from FDA or from EMA. One of them I have to assure that my product granted the marketing authorization from one of them. After that, I can apply for the abridged procedures in MENA.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Sola. The question is, what is the place of maturity level classification of NRAs by WHO in the concept of Reliance recognition?
I can share with you and with Nikolina the guidelines of WHO for regulatory reliance practice, good practice, and you can have a look for the detailed information for this guideline. You can share it with the recorded video, the link of WHO, in order to have a look for the detailed information of WHO guidelines.
Thank you. Please, just a reminder for the participants, you can use the Q&A box for the questions. And there is actually a question from me. So what role do regulatory agencies have in overseeing regulatory reliance efforts? Is there any database, or how is it tracked, the impact of it?
Actually, as we said, that regulatory reliance reduce the workload for each authority to review the dossier or to inspect the manufacturing site. So it is a good point to make use of their resources, whether it is human resources or financial investment. So at first, the country or the authority will evaluate its current status and the knowledge of its expertise. After that, they can see how they will implement the reliance and taking their consideration the political views and how to rely on other countries, and if there any flexibility to negotiate with the other authority. And after the discussion, they can see how the implementation to be performed in their authority, either to implement the, for example, as we see, the pre-audit or verification process, or will be a work sharing, or it will be a complete reliance on the assessment to be performed by authority. So it depends on in each authority and its available resources and expertise. So there are several concepts and pathway which we shared in our presentation. So each country will evaluate its situation and which type of reliance can be adequate and easy to be implemented in reliance to their local national guidelines.
Great, thank you very much. Also another question. What are the main barriers for implementing regulatory reliance systems and how to overcome it? So obviously, you did mention stability aspect of it during your presentation. So obviously, that's one of the factors. But yeah, could you mention maybe some other challenges and how to overcome it?
Well, the political concepts in each country, if there is flexibility to negotiate with country A, or there is some political barriers, it is another point. If there is a specific team who are expert to upgrade their knowledge and not to restrict to their national guidelines. At the same time, they have to negotiate and to accept the negotiation with other authorities and to easy cooperate with the authorities. The main barriers as well, the language. Maybe the authority has a very professional expertise, but there is no translator who can facilitate the translation, specifically for the scientific terminologies and for the pharmaceutical data to be translated for country A, and to have a clear negotiation with the same language. So the language is as well a barrier, and the availability of a pharmaceutical translator who can facilitate the discussion between two different countries with two different languages.
Yeah, thank you very much for that answer. So those have been all the questions so far. Okay, and yeah, thank you very much for answering everything and for holding this session. Thank you to our panelists as well. So as a reminder, this session has been recorded and it will be available on the events.vib.org website. And of course, I want to also thank to all the attendees. Thank you for your time, and I really hope you enjoyed it, and I wish you have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.